There's always an answer for what you find left behind on the side of the road. The old mildewy Styrofoam cup was probably tossed by a careless driver. Old crates dinged with years of use likely fell out of the back of a speeding truck. Some finds, though, are total mysteries. When a man taking a short walk saw a colorful pillowcase alongside a path, he meandered over to investigate. Flabbergasted by what he saw, he brought the contents to the experts, and even they were at a loss for words. Early one morning in February 2020, a Sunderland, England, resident was taking a walk down a wooded path. After some time on the winding trail, he finally emerged onto the street, and he noticed something very odd. There, leaning up against a public garbage can were two tied-off pillowcases, one of them with a Buzz Lightyear graphic. It also looked like the bags were moving. Interested, they peeked inside and instantly jumped back in shock. At a loss for what to do and unsettled by what he saw, the man turned to the Farringdon Community Fire Station. The small suburb was a close-knit community who generally looked out for each other. Located in Sunderland, England, the firefighters who volunteered at the station were well liked and respected. They, the shocked man knew, would know the next steps he should take with the wriggling pillowcase. The pillowcases were filled with snakes. 13 royal pythons split between the two bags were slithering all over each other. They immediately reported it to the firehouse, and workers took the bags to safety. But the next day something worse happened. Firehouse staff went to investigate the area the snakes were found, and they were horrified to discover two more bags of snakes. This time someone placed the bags inside the garbage can. The firefighters were floored by how someone could be so neglectful and cruel to these animals. Snakes might not be the cuddliest creatures on the planet, but they, like everything else, deserve fair treatment. The second pillowcases contained 15 corn snakes in one bag and just one carpet python, which can reach lengths of 9 feet, as adults stuffed into the other. Of course, the firefighters had questions. Where did these snakes come from? Who had access to such a wide variety of them? Those were the questions flying through the heads of every perplexed firefighter at the station. Trevor Walker, the inspector who worked with the Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, said, "Whoever did this discarded them without any concern for the animals, and they went around back to avoid being found out." Fortunately, Walker safely transferred all of the snakes to a local veterinarian who was shocked at the discovery for a thorough inspection. One, however, sadly died not long after arrival. Fortunately, none of the species found carried venom, so they didn't pose a threat to rescuers, even if they were to get bitten. Officials theorized the snakes came from a breeder since none were native to England. There were only 4 snakes native to the United Kingdom. 2 species of grass snake, the smooth snake, and a venomous adder. But it's not just a cruelty factor that makes abandoning exotic animals illegal. The ecosystem suffers. For example, when one Burmese python owner accidentally allowed several of them to escape around the Florida Everglades, the animals absolutely ravaged local wildlife by outcompeting native species. And England already had an existing issue with liberated pets impacting nature. The number of snakes throughout all of England was already on the decline due to a deadly snake fungus that eats away at the scales. This number could potentially drop much faster with a new species suddenly introduced. Terry Phillip, a herpetologist at Reptile Gardens in South Dakota, also pointed out the snakes weren't adept to the harsh United Kingdom winters like the native ones were. None of the snakes dropped off and those 2 incidents would survive. Once the local vet gave the remaining 28 snakes a clean bill of health, RSPCA Inspector Walker transferred them 100 miles in his car to a reptile specialist in Yorkshire who could properly care for them. Hopefully, some of them can be rehomed, Walker said. So far, the Farringdon fire station hasn't found any more slithery surprises, but they're after the culprit. They know what happens when a snake population gets out of control. You don't want to mess with the Burmese python. The biggest of these beasts can reach a length of 23 feet and weigh over 160 pounds. They will eat anything from mice to adult deer. And as of a couple of decades ago, nobody in Florida even knew about them. As their name suggests, the reptiles are native to Asia's tropics, but they were now running wild all over the Everglades. Scientists theorize that following the destruction of Hurricane Andrew, pythons escaped from a zoo and bred like wildfire. Frank Mazzotti didn't know quite where the snakes came from, but he was determined to stop them from spreading into densely populated areas, like Miami. The biologist swore to throw everything and the kitchen sink at them. But would that be enough? Everglades locals tried all kinds of tricks to root out the serpents. They put snake-sniffing dogs out in the marshes and even set loose radio-equipped Judas snakes to hopefully reveal their home base. The pythons only continued to grow. Word got around that the reptiles took over an abandoned night missile site. While that in and of itself didn't threaten anyone, Floridians feared that if left unchecked, the pythons would breed at an incredible rate. Who knew, it could have only been a matter of time until the snakes expanded beyond the missile base and started showing up in places that were more personal. The stakes were dire, but Frank learned of one group that could help. Deep in the forests of southern India, the Irala people have mastered snake catching. They see it as an art and take the practice incredibly seriously, even after India has slapped strict regulations on snake trading. In recent years, the Iralas have captured poisonous reptiles for the purpose of producing antivenoms. Clearly, there was nobody on Earth more qualified. But how could Floridians convince this tribe to help a community on the other side of the world? Frank and his herpetologist pals managed to make contact with the Iralas, and to their surprise, the snake catchers showed interest in helping them. Granted, the Floridians would have to shell out thousands of dollars and agree to some unusual methods. Hard as it was to believe, the Iralas didn't use any state-of-the-art tools for finding and capturing snakes. Instead, their weapon of choice was something found in any garage, a tire iron. Contrary to what you might think, they didn't intend these tire irons for a Simpsons-style whacking day. The Irala used them to clear a path through the brush and pick up snakes, but ultimately they tried to capture the reptiles alive when possible. So, Frank welcomed the best Irala hunters, Masi Sadayan and Vadaval Gopal, to the Everglades. While both men were in their 50s, they were at the top of their game. But the Floridians got nervous when the Iralas said they'd never before hunted snakes so large. However, Masi and Vadaval smiled when they shared this fact. They were eager for the challenge, the chance to put their skills to the ultimate test. Granted, their brand of animal control was not without its risks. From the start, the Irala's tactics puzzled Frank and his friends. They insisted on marching blindly through the thickest part of the swamp. When a snake's trail ended, Masi and Vadaval made everyone sit down, pray, and smoke a cigarette. Frank's hopes began to wane until one of the Iralas pointed to a shimmer in the mud. Brandishing their trusty tire irons, Masi and Vadaval scooped up a fully grown python. That was only the beginning. With a few more captures under their belts, the Iralas fearlessly plunged into an old missile shaft where herpetologists spotted a nest. The sharp-eyed hunters grasped a muscled python tail and spent hours wrestling it out of tree roots. In that one afternoon, the hunters pulled out 4 monstrous pythons from the overgrown missile shaft. They soon brought their total up to 14 over their first 2 weeks. While the Iralas couldn't stay in the Everglades forever, they did the next best thing. Masi and Vadaval shared their wisdom with the local wildlife management team, which never could have located these pythons with conventional techniques. The Irala knowledge could stem the invasion, so the Floridians wanted to give them something in return. Besides paying the Iralas over $4,000 per python, the Floridians wanted to give them the real American experience. In between expeditions, they watched NFL games and ate hot dogs at Arbiter's, their favorite greasy spoon. After a month, the Iralas returned to India feeling invigorated by the hunt of their lives. The Floridians knew they were quite fortunate to find experts to turn back the snake invasion, but of course, it wasn't always possible to have heroes on hand. Sometimes, everyday people have to use their wits to survive a deadly animal encounter. In the spring of 2017, a mother of 4 named Bianca Dickinson drove her youngest child, Molly, to the end of the long driveway cutting through her ranch in Victoria, Australia. There, she'd meet a snake. But first, to pass the time, while waiting for the school bus to drop off her older kids, Bianca had 2-year-old Molly pose for a few photographs. For 15 minutes, the duo played and snapped silly pictures until the fun came to an abrupt halt. With the school bus in view down the road, Molly posed for one last photo beside a wire fence. She wore a huge grin and pointed behind herself, towards the grass blowing in the wind. It was the perfect photo, or was it? I was looking through my camera lens and was looking at my daughter, Bianca told ABC Australia. I saw something move in the corner of my eye and actually thought it was bark coming off the tree. But it wasn't bark. What Bianca first assumed to be tree bark was actually an eastern brown snake, aka the second most venomous snake in the entire world. And it was slithering right behind her little girl. Venom from the eastern brown snake can paralyze victims and make their blood so thin that it seeps through their pores. Without immediate treatment, a single bite from this critter can send you to an early grave, and it has enough venom to kill 20 adults. So it was no surprise Bianca's insides twisted into a cold heap when she saw one of these snakes just inches away from her baby girl. "I think the snake was touching her boots," Bianca said. "It was that close. But what could she do? All my instincts wanted to run and pick her up and scream and run away," Bianca said. However, that move, she knew, could have had deadly repercussions. If she did that, there was a chance the snake would feel threatened and strike. Complicating the situation, Bianca had to convey to her daughter that there was a big deadly snake behind her and not to make any sudden movements or take any violent steps backward. So what did the mother do? She just froze. In doing so, she communicated non-verbally to Molly that she should do the same. "Luckily," Bianca said, "she copied me." And the snake? Much to Bianca's relief, the eastern brown snake slithered away, leaving Molly unharmed. As it disappeared into the tall grass, the school bus dropped off her 3 older children. But Bianca's panic hadn't subsided yet. "I just started yelling at my other 3 kids to get in the car," she said. "I got in the car and I was shaking." And who could blame her? Her kids immediately noticed she wasn't quite right. While on the drive back up the driveway, her 13-year-old daughter, Imogen, far left, asked, "What happened? Did you see a snake, Mum?" Bianca nodded. "Yes," she told the kids, "and it was at least 2 meters." Her kids didn't buy it. "Oh Mum, it wasn't that big," Imogen said. But naturally, Mother knew best. Back at home, she pulled out her camera and showed her kids the venomous reptile that had come within inches of their little sister. And it shook them all. After seeing just how close Molly had come to the wrong end of a snake, Bianca's older 3 kids didn't want to go outside anymore. Worse, in showing the kids the photos, Bianca uncovered another nasty shock. She'd been taking pictures of Molly for a while before the school bus showed up, and when she reviewed those photos, she learned just how long the snake had been in striking distance. The eastern brown snake posed beside Molly in 3 photos. In the aftermath, Bianca couldn't look at those now infamous photos and didn't sleep well for weeks. "Every time I shut my eyes I see that big snake, and what could have happened?" she said. "I see Molly being taken away in an ambulance." But how did the 2-year-old react to her brush with death? Well, when Bianca showed her daughter the photo, the toddler considered it for a moment. And then she said the funniest thing, "That's me," Molly said gleefully, pointing at herself, blissfully unaware of the snake in the photo. Bianca couldn't help but laugh. At least one of her kids wouldn't end up scarred.